I've prepared for you a state-of-the-art on games, serious games, and simulators about firefighting. I hope it will inspire some discussion on wildfire training using gamification. We'll first start then with the simulations. So these are very training-oriented. The first one is Flame Systems. It's in virtual reality, and it provides training in hazardous and emergency situations. They have their own algorithm that models the way that the fire progresses in the environment and deliver then real fire behavior in a virtual environment. And as you can see here, they managed to integrate industry standard firefighting equipment with the VR headset, therefore combining the game with real equipment. They also provide outcome analysis thanks to their real-time data capture. They have a heat suit that replicates different temperatures considering the user's proximity to the fire in the virtual environment. And this generates biometric readings that they can later use to provide feedback. Up next, we have Firefighter VR. This was developed by Fantastic Foe and NerdDocs, also in 2020. It's a VR training platform for fire departments. It's a complete solution that includes the hardware and the software, as well as the setup and then the further updates. Also has digital user tracking so that they can generate measurable and individual improvement potential. So they generate the data of what the user did, how fast they did it, and then later on, this can be used for their improvement. It's also very scenario-based. So these exercises are focused on, for example, maintenance and practicing on equipment that is rarely or not available at all for all the students at the same time. And yeah, this allows them to do this training. Next, I have here an example of flight simulator that is being used in combination with fire simulation, wildfire simulation. So they combined basically these two technologies, both the flight simulation and the fire propagation and wildfire simulation. This company XVR develops training software for rescue services, and they aim to put the instructor in control. So as we will see in some of the other examples, the instructor can actually modify the scenario in real time and based on what the user is doing, and therefore change it up dynamically. And yeah, this was an example of combining a flight simulator with the wildfire. But as I said, it's only a demo. So from my understanding, nothing really came out of this other than showcasing the potential. Then we have a bit of an older one, FlameSim. This is not in virtual reality. It's simply software. It's targeted again towards fire departments and generally focused on the reinforcement of standard operating procedures and guidelines. And as you can see, it's very gamey, the way that you interact with the world. So you have your tools here. You can choose you can choose them and interact with the objects like this. And something that makes it very easy to then later on look at what the user did is that essentially the user interacts with the world also throughout this menu. And so they pick really which order to go, horizontal, vertical, first floor. And then so the instructor can just look at this and have clear feedback on what the user did. So not so good for immersion, but good for the instructor. Here another virtual reality one. Yeah, it has room for evacuation plans, but it's mostly client-based solution. So this is just a video showcasing the potential of it. Then the actual application is reserved to the clients and their needs. They do have a platform, so it's a subscription-based platform where you have access to a series of training modules like hazards, collapses, etc. So you do give orders in VR, which is something that not all of the virtual reality ones allow for. And yeah, the supervisor mode is in control of the simulation, which is great for customization. Another slightly old one. This one is web-based. And as you can see, it's really separated into different modules. And this is how it works. With your radio, you can call your team members and execute steps. Again, very easy to see what the user does. If you're a supervisor, you can clearly see, okay, they wanted to command to go to the front, and this is how they approached the scenario. And yeah, of course, the hose. So there's some driving, and later on using the radio to perform. There's an example of it here. So yeah, it's basically you select from options that are already on the screen. It's not so much what the user actually does within the virtual world. This is River. It's an interesting use of virtual reality for fire investigation personnel. So thanks to a photorealistic environment, the user can investigate the cause of the fire using the same tools that are also available in the real world. So flashlights, cameras, you can use all of these in these scenarios, which are taken from real incidents. And so this allows the personnel to train fire investigation. So where did the fire come from? What was the cause? Yeah, and it's interesting that they use real scenarios and real data, and then transform them into virtual ones so that everyone can access them. Yeah. This one, I don't have a video, but the interesting part about this VR simulation is that it complies with real procedures. And so the people can get actual training from it. The reports can be used for certification. It teaches the users how to use a fire extinguisher, so very basic. It can be used in any company. And these fire extinguishers are, they have custom-made hardware mounts. So as you can see over here, that basically integrated with the real equipment provides even more immersion. So you can train with real equipment. It's the benefit of this kind of simulation. And lastly, a very old one, 2008. It's a training and response simulation called RescueSim. It's intended for firefighters and civil protection professions to manage fires and other incidents. It does allow for a lot of customization. It's kind of like game engine-y almost. You can really pick what to place. There's also interesting features like you can create news, fake news. Here we go, fake news reports, so that the trainee can see, okay, based on this small piece of information, what can I extract from this? Where should the approach be? So yeah, very old, but had some interesting implementations already. And then we move on to games. So these are entertainment focused, but are also realistic in their portrayal of events as much as entertainment focus can get. So, for example, this is Firefighting Simulator. It came out late last year. It's a multiplayer game where the player and I think, up to 4 players can cooperate in different scenarios. So, for example, they have objectives: search and rescue unconscious victim in the main hall, turn off the electricity. So these are very basic, easy to understand objectives, and the players have to cooperate. Okay, I will take the victim, I will rescue the victim, you put out the fire. And yeah, as you can see, it's very gamey, the way in which you put out the fire. You have to aim at these specific circles. But they do use authentic equipment in the game by well-known US brands. And there is a series of different types of fires, so caused by electronics, chemicals, explosions, backdrafts. There's a lot of possibilities in a lot of different scenarios, but it is scenario-based. Into the Flames is a bit different because it's open world. So you walk around and you drive around, and you respond to these calls, much like a firefighter would, I suppose. Can also be played with multiplayer. So there are several scenarios. For example, the house fire or the gas station fire, different scenarios, and the player walks to them and must figure out how to intervene. And yeah, they have a dynamic spreading of the fire to try and make it as realistic as possible. But that remains to be seen in games. And then going a bit more to the strategy approach, we have Emergency Fire Response from 2003, where the player is in charge of an entire firefighting team. So they have access to technical officers, environmental specialists, bulldozers, paramedics, literally everything. And again, in different scenarios, they have to manage all of these units and get to the objectives in time and figure out the best course of action to deal with the specific scenarios. So you can see there, we have to command all these units and rescue, for example, these civilians in time, and so on. Yeah, and then we are rated based on the speed. And then we have a whole game series, which is Emergency, also strategy. So, but this time we are dealing with monetary constraints. We only have so much money to allocate the equipment and the personnel. So we have to really pick what is best suited for which situation. But it's again strategy, so commanding a series of units, ambulance services, police, technical services. So the player is an incident commander for these rescue units. And then the 2018 mobile version streamlines this aspect a lot, but also manages to achieve this strategy gameplay where you have to figure out where to take the you have to level up the units. Of course, it's catering to more of the mobile audience, but it's still a strategy based game where we have to conduct all these units. Emergency Call is along the same lines. So it's a fully detailed simulation of a fire department. It was modeled on the Fire Brigade of Mülheim. And yeah, it's quite realistic in its portrayal of the equipment and such. Also scenario-driven gameplay, and I don't know if you can see, but there's really a lot that you can do in terms of all the lights and you would drive one of these vehicles, because it's not simply driving them down the road. You have to take some things into consideration. So yeah, so an attempt at making it really realistic and modeling it after a real fire brigade. So you can see we have to pull down really almost everything to the minuscule detail, and we can still give orders. This is along the same lines, Emerge NYC, but for the New York Fire Brigade. So they are, it's quite realistic in terms of interactions. So you really have to plug the hose to the fire, to the this thing, which I've forgotten the name, fire hydrant, yeah, put out the fires. This is just a tutorial on how to use it, but you do have an actual water supply, and yeah, there's an intent to replicate reality as much as possible in these ones. So the same for this one, a little bit older, 2015. But for an airport fire department. So as you can see, these games are very focused on the personnel, which is, I think, what most people consider to be the most fun. Everyone wants to be the hero that is on the front lines, and not so much on the management side, on the prevention side, on the decision making from an upper level side. And lastly, just a very old example of a very old game, so from 2001, attempting to replicate a rescue helicopter. So, but of course, the technology was limited at the time. But yeah, just to show you that there have been games like this for a lot of years, and all of them do end up trying to simulate reality at some point, but they focus really on these let's rescue people, let's put out fires side, and not so much the other side of it. Yeah. So after these examples, I will just give you an overview. As you saw, the training simulators are they come in two facets, so they can be either client-based or pre-made packages. And pre-made packages are really, okay, this is a gas station fire, this is a house fire, or they are client-based in terms of you select what you want, you tell them what you want, and these things are custom-made for you, these scenarios. And then on the other hand, we have the juxtaposition between virtual 3D scenarios and virtual reality. For example, it is much harder to give orders through a menu in virtual reality, because you have to consider things like fatigue, movement, all these things. It's harder to have such a big menu and to really delegate, play a strategy game, if you will, in virtual reality. Yeah, the supervisors you saw can sometimes control and customize the scenarios, both before they are actually implemented and also in real time, which can be really useful. It's important to generate data from the training so that this can be analyzed and can provide feedback to the trainee. In most of the cases of implementation of serious games, this is something that is actually really important. It's to not only experience the learning, but then what comes after, like looking at what could have been done, what should have been done. And for all of this, it's really important to generate data. And there's very few scaling, for example, from first response operators to the strategic command personnel. It's either or. You always have to choose if you want something that is for the package that is for the ground units or for the command personnel. The games, as you also saw, depict often very simplified first-person interactions. They're just mostly focused on putting out the fires with a hose or cutting doors with an axe, or they focus on the strategy and the management of the whole team. So it's almost godlike in this way. It's either you're the small person down there or you're a god overseeing all of the operations. So the player ends up being either a firefighter or an incident commander that is overseeing every single unit at the same time. That's it for me.